Hello everyone. My name is Niklas Vainio. I'm also from the University of Turku. I do constitutional law, and that's sort of my approach to these questions, not so much the specifics of GDPR or anything like that, but maybe the more like the right to privacy aspect of this. But I was asked to explain some aspects of the GDPR that may be relevant in this context. Actually, there's much talk about GDPR. For the last 2 or 3 years I've been following the discussion. There's so much talk about it, how important it is. This conference, everybody's talking about it. I'm a bit skeptical actually, whether it will have as big effect as people seem to think it has. But we will see. Some aspects, some features of it probably will change things. Some may remain less influential. This is just my sort of skeptical legal realist view. Data protection didn't come in the world recently. It's been with us for a long time. But only now it seems people have started talking about, like everybody has started talking about the GDPR, and our GDPR will change things a lot. But we've had data protection regulation all the way from early 1980s. We had a European Council Data Protection Convention from 1981, and we had EU Data Protection Directive from 1995, and now this is the next step in that development. What I think is changing in the new regulation is sort of the perspective. The earlier regulation was based more on sort of the economic aspects of data. Having a legislation that allows data to flow freely from country to country. In a way, putting some protection in place, but not putting too big borders for it to move. So data protection directive, for instance, in EU was created. But now we have more like a user-centric or person or citizen-centric approach. It's more based on the idea of protection of fundamental rights and the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, which protects privacy, protects data protection, protects equality, and so on. So I just took up a few things from the GDPR that may have relevance in this context. And first that I want to bring up is consent. Like in many things in life, in data protection you need consent for things. That's the primary grounds for processing data. Not the only one, but the primary one. And in GDPR, the consent is more strictly defined than in the previous legislation. So now it requires that consent is freely given. There is, for instance, no power imbalances related to it. That it's specific. That it's informed. And it's unambiguous. This is stricter than what it was before, especially when it comes with the requirement that it needs to be given via an affirmative action, that the user needs to do something like push a button to give the consent. It's not enough that it's hidden somewhere in some legal text. This is different. This may change things. I don't know. I don't know what it means exactly in this context, but you are seeing this everywhere in each website you go. One thing that is increased in the regulation is transparency. The regulation requires data controls to give more information to the user about their rights, for instance, and what I mentioned about informed consent. It requires the user actually really knows what they are consenting to. So here I see some change. What I think certainly will have effect is the data portability. This is something that didn't exist in this form in previous legislation. What is new is that the new regulation requires that you have the right to have your data in a machine-readable sort of standard format, that it's easy to transfer it to some other place. This will enable a lot of services and businesses and things like that were not possible before. And especially relevant in the loyalty app context is the right to object to marketing and profiling, which say that person has the right to object to processing of such personal data that is used for marketing, and right to process such processing, right to object to such processing that leads to profiling and right to object marketing related profiling, I think it was. And also third thing is right to object automated decisions that have legal effects. There are exceptions to all of these, but this is something. This existed in some form in previous legislation too, but now it's quite clearly spelled. And the fifth thing I bring up that is relevant with regard to the question whether GDPR really will have effect is the enforcement part of it. Now, in the new legislation and in the new sort of data protection regime, the data protection authorities have more powers. There are more sort of there's more sort of harmonization of maybe powers and how they work and so on, and they're in many ways stronger than before, especially with the possibility of ordering fines to data processors, fines that may go up to tens of millions of euros. And I think that fines part is something that will have effect, because it's something that companies will pay attention to. Because in the previous legislation, it had lots of applications for data controllers. Because everything is personal data and everything is processing of personal data. But it didn't have much on that side, on the enforcement side. So I'd say these 5 points were something that I think sort of areas where GDPR could or will have effect in this loyalty app context. Thanks.